Okay, gang, this is part 2 in the Kia Sportage oil leak, and as I'm moving along I'm making some progress, and I'll just show you where I'm at. I removed the bolts from that cover that I talked about in a previous video, and when I did that I made a simple little template, let's say, of that cover because the bolts are different lengths. So this is just an easy way to keep track of the bolts so you get them back in the right place. So I had mentioned previously that to get that cover off, because the oil pickup tube is attached to that, I have to pull the oil pan. And to pull the oil pan, I have to pull the exhaust. Well, I started pulling this apart, and I got the main connection off the catalytic converter, and also removed the clamp, and loosened the clamp that attaches to this bracket. Well, this bracket has to come off to get the pan off. Well, easier said than done. There's 2 bolts up there that are behind the catalytic converter, and so I tried to get a short socket in there to break those loose, but it's not going to happen. And I guess I could take the catalytic converter off, except it's welded to the exhaust manifold. It's all one piece. And I don't want to break anything loose and run the risk of breaking a bolt in the cylinder head. So what I decided to do is I'm just going to cut that bracket off. That's the advantage of having power tools and a welder. So I'm going to cut that off, and that'll give me access to this oil pan. So once I get that done, then I've already bought the timing belt kit, which comes with a new water pump. I'm going to go ahead and change it while I'm in there. The tensioner and the idler pulley, and of course the water pump gasket. And then the secondary part of that is the cover that I talked about, new gasket there, and a seal for the crankshaft. So I'll continue to get this cover off, and there's another picture of it with the cover and the oil pickup connected to it. So I'm going to drive on, try to get this thing done. Well, this only gets better. Got the oil pan loose after cutting off that bracket, and guess what? I can't get the pan out. Apparently there's a set of ears inside the pan right there, you can just see, and the flange at the front won't clear the cradle. This only gets better. So I'll have to clean everything up in place. I still got to get that cover off, that front piece, and there's you can see the pickup tube. So I think I can clean everything up. It'll be a little more fun than I had anticipated. Yay! Well, I guess this justifies taking all this apart. I got that cover off, and if you look, this is the main oil passage right here. And this, to me, is the witness mark where stuff was getting through and leaking up over this bolt or around this bolt area. And so, if you look, if I can get a good shot, I'll put a little light on it. That's that oil passage. And if you notice, you'll see the gasket is kind of out of place, but you see the cracks. So basically the oil was just following that crack and pushing out at the top of the cover and leaking down, like I said. So I'll call it a little moral victory that I found the problem, but a little more challenging since I have to deal with not being able to pull the oil pan completely out. So I'm going to get this cleaned up and reverse the process and see if I can't get done by, I don't know, Easter. Well, I made a little progress. I got the surface area for the gasket, mating surface, all cleaned up. The oil pan is all cleaned up along with the block, and clean up the back side of that cover. I also replaced the crankshaft seal. And of course I have the gasket So that'll be going in place. And I have ultra black, which I'm going to use for the oil pan. Now the tricky part is I've got to get sealant on that pan while it's still hanging there. So I guess I'll figure out a way to do that too. Well, I'm feeling a little bit better about it. I am making progress. I got that cover plate back in, and I cleaned up the oil pan, got it resealed, so it's all bolted in place. I also welded my bracket back on for the exhaust and bolted it up. So things are progressing. I also replaced the water pump, as you can see there. And just a little thing I want to point out. I talked earlier about removing the bolt, the square-headed bolt that holds the alternator in. And I don't know if you can see that bolt. It's down here. Right there. Well, this bracket that's still attached to the engine has a slot in it. And that you can leave the bolt in there, is what I'm saying, and then drop it down in, and that whole assembly will go into that slot. And then the second part of that is these two bolt holes here will go on the face of the water pump. So I'm going to install that and then put the bolts back in, these bolts that go into the head, and work on getting all these accessories back in place so I can put the new timing belt on. Well, I feel like I'm making progress. I got the timing belt on, and I just followed the instructions. Pretty basic, but got that back on and made sure my alignment marks stayed where they were. I also got the lower cover on and the upper cover. So that's in place, and then got the engine mount back in, and there's a bracket down there that went underneath the motor mount assembly. Got the alternator back on, bracket in place. Now this was a bit of a challenge because there's two pulleys here, and they can't go on as an assembly. You have to put one in and then slip the other one on. So what I did, I don't know if you can see or not, I painted some silver on there with a silver Sharpie to line up the two pulleys so that the holes were lined up, and then I squared up the holes on the pulley face, and basically that gave me an alignment. I could tell where my pulleys were in relation to the pulley face. So those bolts are in now. I just have to tighten them up and then continue on. Still got to mount the power steering pump and put the crank pulley on, and pretty soon I'll be putting oil in it and firing it up. Just a little reminder, after you get the everything assembled and you're going to put on the cover for the crankshaft gear, make sure that little piece goes in first, and then your pulley assembly, and of course your bolt. Now, it looks like somebody has torqued on this pretty good before, and according to the instructions it's supposed to be 100 and, I don't know if you can read that or not, 125 to 133 foot-pounds. So just a little tip for you. Well, it's running, so I must have got the timing right anyway. It's been running for about 10 minutes, and I've been adding antifreeze to it, trying to get the heater core to fill back up. And other than spilling a little bit of antifreeze over there, I'm not seeing any evidence of leaks. That's a good sign. I see a little bit of residual here and there, but nothing that's from the repair work that I just did. So I'm happy with that. Not one of my favorite jobs. I've said before I like challenges, but not necessarily this kind of challenge. I'd rather be doing sheet metal work. But all I gotta do is button this back up and it'll be back on the road, and I can get back on the Mustang. Anyway, hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.